revenge. For us. For us. For us.
They told me I didn't deserve Grandma's money, that she only kept me around out of pity. I stayed silent at first, but when the lawyer opened that envelope, every lie, every fake smile, every whispered insult started to burn right through them. I never wanted her fortune. I only wanted the truth. But Grandma, she left both. And what came next tore my family apart in a way no one saw coming. Stay with me till the end. You'll understand why Grandma's last words changed everything. My name is Natalie Brooks, and I'm 29 years old. I take pictures for a living, not the glamorous kind you see in magazines, but the quiet ones, the moments people almost forget happened, like a father tying his daughter's shoe, a tired nurse laughing at 3 a.m., all the small but real things. I guess that's why Grandma liked my work. She always said, "You see truth before it knows it's being watched." Truth. That word means something different to me now. Because the truth is, I grew up in a family that hated honesty unless it benefited them. My parents, Richard and Diane, weren't bad people, just hollow ones. Everything they did was about appearance. The right neighborhood, the right friends, the right story to tell at dinner parties. And me, I never fit that picture. Dad worked in corporate finance, cold, precise, always planning 3 moves ahead. Mom floated between charity boards and luncheons, always smiling but never warm. They wanted a son who'd take over Dad's firm. And they got one. My brother Jason. Jason was charming, reckless, and expensive. If he wanted something, he got it. If he broke it, someone else paid for it. Usually Grandma. But Grandma Sawyer, she was different. She had this presence, quiet, firm, like someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be obeyed. She built her fortune from a small paper company, long before Dad joined the picture. She was sharp, a woman who'd notice a lie before you said it. And she loved me, not for being perfect, but for being real. When I was 8, I'd spend summers with her at the Lake Carver estate, a place that felt pulled from another time. Old oak floors, brass knobs, lavender everywhere. She'd tell me stories under the maple tree at the edge of the lake. She said every generation had one person brave enough to break the cycle. And she used to look at me when she said it. That house became my world. While my parents were at business dinners, I learned how to bake lemon cake, fix a garden hose, and read her old journals. She wrote everything down. Her deals, her regrets, even her fears. There were names I didn't recognize back then. Lawyers, trustees, silent partners. But they mattered later. When I turned 18, Grandma gave me her old Polaroid camera. She said, "This will help you remember people the way they really are." And she was right, because years later, that same camera would capture something my parents could never erase. After high school, I went to art school in Chicago. Grandma funded it quietly, told my parents I'd gotten a scholarship. They believed her. They wanted to. Those years were the only time I felt like I was becoming someone. I learned to live small, to notice light, to be patient. But every call from home reminded me why I'd left. Mom would complain about Grandma being too controlling. Dad said she was getting senile. And Jason, he joked that once Grandma died, the rest of us can finally breathe. I laughed it off, but something about it chilled me. When I graduated at 22, Grandma was the only one who came. She brought a bouquet of lilies and a silver bracelet with both our initials, NS. She hugged me tighter than usual and whispered, "Natalie, keep your light steady. People will try to dim it when it shines too bright." 3 weeks later, she was gone. They said it was peaceful, in her sleep. But when I walked into that hospital room, something felt unfinished. Her journals were gone. Her bedside drawer, empty. And my parents were already talking about next steps. That was the first time I realized grief and greed sound almost the same when people speak fast enough. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the war. The one they didn't even know they'd already lost. The morning of Grandma's funeral felt unreal. The sky hung low and gray, like the clouds themselves were holding their breath. She was gone, and yet everything around me still felt like her. The smell of lavender from her old scarf, the faint sound of her favorite hymn playing in the church, even the way the light hit the stained glass. It looked exactly like the colors she used to paint with. But none of that mattered to my parents. Dad was already talking to guests, shaking hands like it was a corporate event. Mom had on her pearl earrings, the ones Grandma gave her years ago, pretending like she'd earned them. And Jason, well, Jason was nowhere to be found. I stood in the last pew, holding Grandma's camera in my hand. The strap was frayed, but I couldn't let go. It was the only thing of hers I still had. When the service ended, people began leaving one by one. But I noticed something strange. A man sitting alone near the back, wearing a dark gray suit. He hadn't said a word the entire time. When I looked his way, he nodded, slightly, almost respectfully. Later, as we walked out, he approached me. "Miss Brooks, I'm Matthew Bennett. I was your grandmother's attorney. She asked me to speak with you." Privately. That was the first time I heard his name. The man who would later stand between me and the people who tried to destroy me. But that day, I just nodded. I didn't know yet what Grandma had planned. I didn't know she'd left behind something more powerful than her money. Her truth. At home, the air was thick. Mom sat by the fireplace, scrolling through her phone like she couldn't feel the room around her. Dad was pacing, already on calls with family accountants. They weren't grieving, they were calculating. Your grandmother's assets will be tied up for a while. Natalie, the lawyer will handle the paperwork, but don't worry. We'll make sure it's distributed fairly. Fairly. That word echoed in my head. He said it the same way he used to when Jason got a new car, and I got a life lesson. I didn't argue. I just said, okay. Because with my family, silence was the only way to survive. Later that night, I went to Grandma's study, the one room they hadn't touched yet. The air still smelled of her jasmine candle. Her desk was bare, except for one thing, a small brass key taped under the drawer. It opened a compartment I didn't even know existed. Inside was a single envelope, my name written in her handwriting, steady, deliberate. Natalie, if you're reading this, it means the time has come. Don't trust anyone who says they're protecting you. Find Matthew. He knows what to do. And remember, truth survives even when love doesn't. I sat there for a long time, my fingers shaking, the key still in my palm. That was Grandma, always thinking 10 steps ahead. The next morning, things got worse. Mom and Dad called a family meeting. Jason was finally home, sunglasses on indoors, reeking of expensive whiskey. They'd already started talking to the estate manager, Carlos. Apparently, there were complications with the will, assets in multiple trusts, clauses, and new conditions. Honestly, it's ridiculous. Your grandmother always made things so dramatic. She should have just left everything to family. I wanted to scream, to tell her that family doesn't mean blood, it means love. But instead, I watched them. Every word they said told me one thing. They didn't want to honor her. They wanted to erase her. That night, I went back to my room and took one last photo of the estate, of the shadows under the rain. I didn't know it yet, but that picture would become the piece of evidence that shattered their perfect story. The lawyers' meeting was set for Friday morning. Dad said it like it was a business appointment. Mom said it like a victory. But Grandma, she said it like a promise. They thought it was going to be simple. A signature, a few tears, maybe a fight or two. But Grandma had always loved surprises. And that Friday, she gave them one they would never forget. Friday morning came too quietly, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself knows something is about to change. The Brooks family gathered in Grandma's study. Same room, same polished oak desk, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt occupied by tension, by greed, by ghosts of all the words she never said aloud. Mom sat beside Dad, legs crossed, pretending she wasn't trembling. Jason was scrolling through his phone, half smirking, probably imagining which car he'd buy first. Uncle Raymond leaned forward, whispering numbers under his breath like a man rehearsing victory. And then Mr. Bennett walked in. He didn't smile. He just placed a thick envelope on the desk and said quietly, "Mrs. Ruth Brooks left very detailed instructions regarding this estate. Some of what you'll hear today may surprise you." I sat last near the window. The morning sun caught the corner of the envelope, golden edges, just like the stationery Grandma always used. He broke the seal. Then he said something that made my heart stop. She also left a recorded message to accompany her will. Mom stiffened. Dad frowned. Jason rolled his eyes. And then her voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, then I've gone where memories never fade. And if you're still sitting there, Linda, Richard, Jason, you might want to take a deep breath. I built my company from nothing. I raised a family that was supposed to stand together. But somewhere along the line, you started measuring love by what it could buy." Dad coughed, muttering under his breath. Mom tried to smile, the kind of smile people use when they know they're being watched. And then Grandma's voice softened. "Natalie, my darling Natalie, you were the only one who came home when I fell. You sat by me when I couldn't walk. You painted the walls I once built with my own hands. You gave me something money never could, time." The room froze. Everyone looked at me, not kindly, but with a sharpness I could feel in my bones. That's why I made a choice. Every share of Brooks Interiors, every property, every dollar in my accounts will pass to Natalie Brooks, my granddaughter, the one who remembered I was still human. Then chaos began. "What kind of joke is this? Bennett, this has to be a mistake. There's no way she'd do this without." "I assure you, Mr. Brooks, this was verified multiple times. Mrs. Ruth's instructions were explicit. She manipulated her. Emily was living here. She must have influenced her mother into this decision." Her voice cracked. And for the first time, I saw fear behind her anger. Because deep down, she knew the truth. Grandma saw through them long ago. There are, however, conditions. If Natalie chooses to accept, she will take full ownership immediately, but she must also review one final message and the documents contained in the locked chest marked Ruth's legacy. Grandma's initials are carved into the lid. I'd seen it in her studio once. Always locked. Mr. Bennett handed me the key. It was the same brass key I found days earlier. In that moment, everything inside me shifted. The disbelief, the guilt, the love. It all mixed together. Heavy, electric. But I didn't open it there. I knew they were waiting for me to gloat, to make a scene. So I just said quietly, "I'll open it when I'm ready." And I left the room. Behind me, I could still hear them, shouting, accusing, unraveling. Outside, the rain had started again. It was light, almost musical, like Grandma was laughing somewhere above. Later that afternoon, I sat alone in her study, the chest before me, my hands trembling slightly as I turned the key. Inside, there were two things: a stack of old letters tied with ribbon and a USB drive. I plugged it in. The screen lit up with a video. Grandma again, sitting by the window, sunlight behind her. "Natalie, I know they'll blame you. They always blamed the one who didn't play their games. But you deserve peace. And you deserve to know why. I built this company with your grandfather. But when he died, your father and uncle began treating it like a trophy. They borrowed against it, hid debts, and when I confronted them, they threatened to sell it behind my back. I couldn't let them destroy what we made. So I protected it. In your name. Every document, every share, I transferred years ago. Quietly. This will just makes it official. The truth hit me like a wave. She'd known. All of it. Every lie they'd ever told. And she still chose me. Not because I was perfect, but because I stayed. At the bottom of the box was one last letter. 5 words, written in her unmistakable hand. Forgive them, but never forget. That moment, I became very restless. Because for the first time in years, I realized something. The inheritance wasn't the end. It was the beginning. After a short while, I went back in. No one moved. Not my father, not my mother, not even Jason. The only sound was Grandma's mantel clock, ticking steady, like it had been waiting for this very moment to count down. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat once. Mrs. Ruth Brooks' wishes are final, he said quietly. There will be no contest unless. He didn't get to finish. Dad's hand slammed the table. This is a joke, he hissed. It has to be. Jason's voice trembled, but not from sadness. She was confused. Old. She didn't even know what she was signing. Mom didn't speak, just stared at me. That was worse. Her silence carried the kind of anger that doesn't need words. I could feel every eye on me. It was strange, being hated for something you never asked for. When I stood up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Grandma had left me everything. The estate, the shares, the studio, but in that room, it felt like she'd handed me a curse. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside finally broke, rain tapping against the attic windows where I'd moved my things when I came to care for her. Her scent, lavender and old paper, still lingered in the air. I replayed her last days again and again, trying to find the moment she'd made her decision. Had she known this would destroy them? Had she known it would break me too? Then I remembered something she'd said one afternoon, while I was fixing tea. If people love you only when you give them something, make sure the last thing you give them is truth. Those words hit different now. The next morning, the calls started. Dad, Mom, Jason, each one pretending to be reasonable, each one circling the same demand. Sign it over. Be practical. Dad said, you can't run a company. Think of the family's reputation. Mom added, you owe us. Jason whispered. I didn't answer any of them. By the 4th voicemail, I turned off my phone. By the 5th, I realized they weren't going to stop. That's when Mr. Bennett called. He didn't sound surprised. He'd seen it all before. Families unraveling over money they thought would fix everything. There's one more envelope, he told me. Mrs. Brooks asked me to give it to you privately. Inside was a letter and a small brass key. The letter read, for when you start doubting yourself, go to the garden shed. Top drawer. Love, Grandma. It took me 2 days to gather the courage. When I finally opened that drawer, I found a weathered sketchbook. Her handwriting filled every page, designs, journal entries, tiny notes about me. At the back, a sealed envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside was a document titled Living Trust Transfer Confirmation. Grandma had already moved every asset, the estate, the business shares, the jewelry, into a living trust in my name before she died. It was legally irreversible. I sank to the floor, the key still in my hand, and cried. Not because of the money, but because she'd planned everything, even how to protect me from them. But as the relief faded, another feeling crept in. Clarity. They were going to come for me anyway. They'd twist the story, play the victim, make me look like the villain. If Grandma believed in me enough to trust me with everything, Then it was time I started acting like the woman she saw, not the girl they used to dismiss. So I made a plan. Quiet, deliberate, unshakable. I would protect what she left me, not through anger, but through precision. Every document, every account, every share transfer, secured, locked, and legally sealed. And when they tried to take it, they'd learn that Grandma's final gift wasn't just the money. It was the foresight to make sure I could stand on my own, even against them. They never cared about the legacy, only the image. But truth has a way of peeling off the gloss. The screen went black. I sat there frozen, not from grief but from confirmation. Grandma knew. She'd seen what they were long before I did. That same night, Mr. Bennett called again. "Natalie, there's been a development. Your parents and Jason filed an informal claim. They're alleging undue influence and mental instability. Meaning they're trying to prove she wasn't in her right mind when she changed her will." I could almost hear Jason's smug grin through the silence. "They won't win," Bennett continued, "but it'll get ugly." I didn't say a word, because I'd already made my decision. If they wanted a war, they were about to find out just how much truth Grandma had left behind. The next morning, I went through every document in that trust folder. Tucked between the legal papers was a list written in Grandma's handwriting, names, dates, meeting notes. At the top, she'd written, "For Natalie, when the lies start to surface." They weren't just names. They were people she'd caught, relatives who had stolen from her over the years, shifted company funds, manipulated board votes. Jason's name was there, twice. So was my father's. And at the bottom, underlined twice. Diane, offshore account 2019. I sat back, stunned. It wasn't inheritance they'd lost. It was exposure they feared. That night, I called Mr. Bennett again. "I'm not just defending the will anymore," I said. "I'm defending her truth. And I have proof." He didn't ask what I meant. He just said, "Then it's time we go public." Every photo told a story: board meetings, company trips, charity events, all of them showing the same pattern. Richard smiling beside investors he'd later betray. Jason holding a check meant for Grandma's foundation. Diane whispering into the ear of a man who later lost a $1 million donation. The truth was right there, hidden in plain sight. I stayed up for 3 days building the evidence. When it was ready, I sent it anonymously to the one journalist Grandma still trusted, Marion Cole from the Herald. 3 days later, the headline hit: "The Brooks Family Scandal. Missing funds, betrayal, and a grandmother's final lesson." The story spread like wildfire. News anchors replayed clips of my parents' charity events, business insiders whispered, and Jason deleted his social media overnight. But I stayed silent, because sometimes silence screams louder than any press conference ever could. Then came the voicemail from Mom. Her voice cracked, for the first time, not from rage but from fear. "Natalie, what have you done? You've ruined us." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because the truth was, they'd ruined themselves long before Grandma died. She just left the lights on long enough for everyone to finally see it. When I finally walked into Grandma's studio that evening, I saw something I'd missed before, one of her old film reels labeled Legacy. I played it. It wasn't about wealth or property. It was a video of her walking through her garden, talking softly. I built everything I had with my hands. But the real inheritance, Natalie, is learning when to let go of what tries to break you. For the first time since her death, I smiled, because I finally understood. This wasn't just about power, money, or family assets. It was about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be defended. And that was exactly what Grandma saw in me. After Grandma's letter, I thought things would calm down. But peace never lasts long in a house built on secrets. 2 weeks later, the The first article appeared. Headline: Estranged granddaughter inherits entire Brooks estate. Family left with nothing. There was a photo of me leaving Mr. Bennett's office. Hair messy, eyes tired, with a caption that said the photographer who got lucky. Jason must have sent it. He'd always been good at playing victim, especially when an audience was watching. Mom called that evening. No apology, just anger disguised as calm. Natalie, do you realize how this looks? People are asking questions. Your father's colleagues are wondering how their golden boy got cut out of the will. I interrupted. There was a pause. Then the coldness. Don't be cruel. Whatever you think Grandma did, you're not ready for the kind of responsibility she left you. Maybe I'm not, I said quietly, but I'm not signing anything over. The line went dead. That night, I checked my email. There were dozens of messages from unknown senders, most of them journalists, some pretending to be friends, all asking for my side of the story. But one stood out. It was from Emma, Grandma's old nurse. Subject line: I think she wanted you to see this. Attached was a short video, dated 3 weeks before Grandma's death. Grandma sat in her armchair, the same one by the window where she used to knit. She looked tired, but sharp. If you're watching this, she said, then I'm gone. And if they're angry, let them be. I know what I've done. She smiled faintly. You always saw people for who they were, Natalie, even when it hurt. That's why I chose you. Not because you needed money, but because you understood value. They never cared about the legacy, only the image. But truth has a way of peeling off the gloss. The screen went black. I sat there frozen, not from grief, but from confirmation. Grandma knew. She'd seen what they were long before I did. That same night, Mr. Bennett called again. Natalie, there's been a development. Your parents and Jason filed an informal claim. They're alleging undue influence and mental instability. Meaning they're trying to prove she wasn't in her right mind when she changed her will. I could almost hear Jason's smug grin through the silence. They won't win, Bennett continued, but it'll get ugly. I didn't say a word, because I'd already made my decision. If they wanted a war, they were about to find out just how much truth Grandma had left behind. The next morning, I went through every document in that trust folder. Tucked between the legal papers was a list written in Grandma's handwriting, names, dates, meeting notes. At the top, she'd written, for Natalie, when the lies start to surface. They weren't just names. They were people she'd caught, relatives who had stolen from her over the years, shifted company funds, manipulated board votes. Jason's name was there, twice. So was my father's. And at the bottom, underlined twice. Diane, offshore account, 2019. I sat back, stunned. It wasn't inheritance they'd lost. It was exposure they feared. SFX, slow building pulse, soft inhale. That night, I called Mr. Bennett again. I'm not just defending the will anymore, I said. I'm defending her truth. And I have proof. He didn't ask what I meant. He just said, then it's time we go public. Every photo told a story. Board meetings, company trips, charity events. All of them showing the same pattern. Richard smiling beside investors he'd later betray. Jason holding a check meant for Grandma's foundation. Diane whispering into the ear of a man who later lost $1 million donation. The truth was right there, hidden in plain sight. I stayed up for 3 days building the evidence. When it was ready, I sent it anonymously to the one journalist Grandma still trusted, Marion Cole from the Herald. 3 days later, the headline hit. The Brooks family scandal. Missing funds, betrayal, and a grandmother's final lesson. The story spread like wildfire. News anchors replayed clips of my parents' charity events. Business insiders whispered. And Jason deleted his social media overnight. But I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence screams louder than any press conference ever could. Then came the voicemail from Mom. Her voice cracked, for the first time, not from rage but from fear. "Natalie, what have you done? You've ruined us." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because the truth was, they'd ruined themselves long before Grandma died. She just left the lights on long enough for everyone to finally see it. When I finally walked into Grandma's studio that evening, I saw something I'd missed before, one of her old film reels labeled Legacy. I played it. It wasn't about wealth or property. It was a video of her walking through her garden, talking softly. I built everything I had with my hands. But the real inheritance, Natalie, is learning when to let go of what tries to break you. For the first time since her death, I smiled, because I finally understood. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be defended. And that was exactly what Grandma saw in me. Peace never lasts long after exposure, especially when the people you expose have spent their whole lives pretending to be untouchable. 3 days after the story broke, the front gates clanged open. A black sedan rolled up the driveway, glossy, impatient. Mom stepped out first. Her heels clicked against the stone like gunshots. Dad followed, jaw tight, suit immaculate but eyes sunken. Jason trailed behind, sunglasses hiding the shame he pretended wasn't there. They didn't call. They didn't text. They just came, like trespassers who still thought they owned the place. "Natalie," Dad said sharply, "we need to talk." "Then talk," I replied. They entered the foyer, the same space where Grandma used to host Christmas dinners, laughter echoing off marble. Now it felt colder, emptier, like the house itself knew who didn't belong anymore. Mom crossed her arms. "You've humiliated this family. Do you have any idea what your little stun has done to our name?" "Our name," I said. "Or your reputation?" Jason scoffed. "Oh, come on, Natalie. You leaked private financial records to the press. That's a crime." I turned to him. "So is embezzlement, Jason. But you seemed fine with that when it was Grandma's money you were moving." Dad stepped forward. "You're making accusations you don't understand. That company was built by your grandmother, and me, and bled dry by you," I said calmly. "I have her ledgers, board minutes, emails. You signed off every transfer she didn't approve." Mom's lips trembled, but not from guilt, from rage. "We gave you everything, Natalie." I shook my head slowly. "No, Grandma did. You just pretended it was you." "This conversation," I said, "is being recorded for legal protection." Dad's face went pale. "You can't do that." "Already done," I said. "And before you ask, Bennett has a copy." That shut them up. For a moment, no one spoke. The thunder outside rolled closer. Deep, slow, inevitable. Then Mom tried another tactic. Her voice softened. "Natalie, honey, we made mistakes. But we're still family. Can't we fix this privately?" "Privately?" I said. "Like how you privately told Grandma to rewrite her will years ago." She flinched. That hit home. Dad's voice hardened. "You think you've won something here, but you've only made enemies. There are people watching this case who won't side with you." "Then they'll learn what she taught me," I said quietly. "That truth doesn't need sides." They left that night, furious, humiliated, cornered. But the damage they'd done wasn't over yet. 2 days later, Mr. Bennett called again. "Natalie, your parents filed a motion to freeze the estate funds pending further investigation." "On what grounds?" "Public damage, alleged misconduct, mental coercion, the usual desperation." I sighed. "So, they're still fighting?" "Yes, but they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They filed it under your grandmother's company trust name, not the private legacy trust. That means you, as the executor, can counterfile and expose their fraudulent transactions as part of the defense. It hit me all at once. The plan. The quiet revenge Grandma had built into her paperwork. "Do it," I said. "File everything." "All of it?" Bennett asked. "Every record. Every receipt. Let them drown in their own numbers." Within a week, Bennett's counterclaim hit the court docket, complete with certified proof of Richard's fund diversions and Jason's misuse of company accounts. Public opinion shifted again, this time sharply. Investors pulled out. The board called emergency meetings. Mom's social club revoked her membership pending investigation. And through it all, I stayed silent. Because Grandma once said, "Dignity is louder than revenge, but sometimes silence can be both." When the hearing finally came, I didn't sit with the press or the lawyers. I sat in the back, in Grandma's old shawl, watching the people who once looked down on me try to explain their lies under oath. Jason stumbled. Mom cried. Dad invoked memory loss. But the truth didn't need my words. It was written in theirs. The court ruled in my favor. The inheritance stood. Their appeal was denied. The judge's words still echo in my mind. The decedent's wishes are clear, and no credible evidence of undue influence has been presented. When it was over, Bennett placed his hand on my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you." I nodded. I think she already knew I'd get here. We walked out of the courthouse as flashbulbs burst and rain started to fall again. The same kind that poured on the day she died. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt cleansing. It's been 8 months since that day in court. 8 months since the truth finally surfaced. And the house that once suffocated me finally breathed again. I still live in Grandma Sawyer's house, though it doesn't feel like hers anymore. The rooms are brighter now. The curtains are open. The smell of turpentine and roses lingers in the studio where I paint, something she always told me to try, but I never did until she was gone. The foundation, the Sawyer Trust for Women in the Arts, is alive now. We've already funded 5 scholarships. The first recipient cried when she saw her name engraved on the wall plaque beside Grandma's portrait. Sometimes I imagine Grandma smiling at that moment. The same quiet smile she wore whenever she caught me sneaking extra sugar into my tea. As for my parents, Dad tried to appeal, of course. But once the hidden documents surfaced, the forged signatures, the hush money trail, his lawyers pulled out quietly. Mom moved out of the city. I hear she's living with her sister now. Jason called once from rehab. He said he was sorry. I didn't say much, just told him Grandma would have been proud he finally asked for help. I learned something through all of it. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. But truth rebuilds what money destroys. I spend most mornings walking through the garden she planted, rows of lilies and peonies bending under sunlight. There's a new bench there now, with an inscription carved into the wood. For those who choose integrity when no one's watching. That was the last line from her journal, the one she never finished. I think she left it for me. Sometimes, I still hear her voice when I'm working in the studio, telling me to lift my chin, to look for the light even when the whole frame feels shadowed. And I do, every single day, because in the end, Grandma didn't just leave me her estate. She left me a mirror, one that showed who I truly was when the world stripped everything else away. And now, when people ask about my family, I smile, because I finally have one again. It's not made of blood. It's made of truth, legacy, and the quiet strength of the woman who refused to let lies write our story. This was hers, but it became mine. They said I didn't deserve Grandma's money. Maybe they were right, because what she left me wasn't just wealth. It was the truth they spent years hiding from. And truth, it doesn't need defending. It just needs time to speak. I used to think revenge was about payback, but now I know real revenge is peace. The kind that doesn't shout, it just endures. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's proof that you survived louder storms than they'll ever understand. This was never about money. It was about legacy. And the truth, it always finds its way home. If you believe truth always wins, subscribe for more stories like this. This is true revenge.